Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 277. I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. On today's show, I'm talking about the latest round of NATO expansion. Finland and Sweden are now both looking to get under the U.S. security umbrella. And I'll be updating the tensions with Russia, the war in Ukraine. So a lot to get through on today's show. Share the Show is hosted at the Libertarian Institute. We post the show on the blog at antiwar.com. The video version goes up at YouTube, Rumble, and Odysee. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleAnzalone_. And you can support the show at Patreon, Subscribestar, and through crypto. All that information is in the show notes page. Another way to help the show, and this time to help yourself, is by doing your CBD shopping with the show sponsor, Paloma Verde, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. The promo code is PEACE. When you spend $75 or more, that will save you 20%, and it gets the show a kickback. Great way to help yourself live a better life and to help out the show. There's tons of great products at Paloma Verde. They put their lab tested results right there on the website, so you know you're getting high quality products. My particular favorite from Paloma Verde is the sports cream. I like the topical products just because I tend to have some muscle pain, and it works so quickly. It smells great, and it's a good price for what you get, how long it lasts for. It doesn't take very much to get a good amount of pain relief, and so I really recommend the sports cream. But they also have the soft gels, gummies, extracts, even products for your dog. So check out PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Just be sure to use the promo code PEACE when you check out, so you could get yourself a discount and help out the show. All right, now let's get into the episode. And just starting off here, the big news, I think, is the plan now supported widely by NATO. We've been talking about it on the show for a month or two now, since April, really, that Finland and Sweden were likely going to apply for NATO membership. Initially, it was predicted that this was going to come in June, when we get it about a month early. Last week, both Helsinki and Stockholm said that they supported joining the alliance, and I believe that both states are now going through their parliamentary motions to affirm joining the alliance, and have started to submit the membership application stuff, and so that is in the process. The biggest potential problem for this that would make it unlikely that these two Nordic states join NATO is Turkey. And so on May 13th, myself and Will Porter wrote this article for the Libertarian Institute titled "Turkey Could Block NATO Membership for Finland and Sweden." The North Atlantic Treaty Organization's sole Asian member has suggested it could bar two Nordic countries from entering the alliance. On Thursday, leaders in Helsinki and Finland would apply for NATO membership without delay. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in late February, both Finland and neighboring Sweden have increasingly discussed joining the Western military bloc. Stockholm is expected to follow Helsinki's application sometime in the coming days, and they have since taken those steps. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has previously said that both nations would be very much welcomed by all 30 allies, even suggesting their membership could be expedited. In April, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also declared that the White House strongly supported membership for the two Nordic states. On Friday, however, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara could not support the move, claiming that Finland and Sweden are home to many terrorist organizations. He added, "We are following the developments regarding Sweden and Finland, but we don't hold positive views. For a country to join NATO, it must have the unanimous support of all other members." Erdogan says his country regrets approving Greek membership after it rejoined the alliance in the 1980s, deeming it a mistake. Ankara and Athens have a number of ongoing territorial disputes and have even fought a war over Cyprus. The Turkish leadership did not elaborate on his claims regarding terrorist cells active in Sweden or Finland, though he may have been referring to Kurdish groups which have clashed with Turkish forces in both Syria and Turkey itself. Western support for Kurdish militant factions in Turkey have created tensions with Ankara for nearly a decade. Responding to Erdogan's comments, Finnish foreign minister called for patience and step-by-step process as Helsinki presses its NATO bid, adding that he would meet with his Turkish counterpart on Sunday to discuss the issue further. Sweden, for its part, said it remains confident it will secure backing from all NATO members to join the bloc despite the Turkish resistance. And so to get into the Syria stuff with the Kurds just a little bit here, for a little bit of background, longtime listeners of the show obviously know that the U.S. and Turkey have a pretty serious split over the U.S. handling and support for the Syrian Kurds, particularly the YPG. Turkey says that the YPG is merely the Syrian branch of the Turkish PKK, which the U.S. has listed as a terrorist group in the past. The Kurds are certainly an oppressed minority in Turkey, and there is definitely some violent resistance that has been directed at civilians, particularly in the past. I don't know how much this is currently ongoing in Turkey by Kurdish minority groups, but Turkey has largely suppressed the Kurdish community as a whole, including jailing a lot of the political leadership. And this has certainly accelerated since the coup attempt in Turkey in July of 2016. Another potential allegation that Turkey could be waging here is that these countries support a man by the name of Fatah Gulen, who Turkey claims was behind the 2016 coup. He lives in Pennsylvania. Turkey has demanded his extradition. And so my initial instinct here is that Turkey actually isn't going to long-term oppose NATO membership for Sweden or Finland. They're looking to extract concessions, particularly dealing with Syria. I think the end of the arming and support for the Syrian Kurds, potentially looking to get the extradition of some Kurds who live and have sought asylum in Europe. And then also, if you look at the 2016 coup, you have Fatah Gulen in the United States, who Turkey during the Trump administration really tried to get extradited. They could be looking there. Also, there's some Turkish military generals who fled to Greece after the failed coup attempt, and I'm guessing that Turkey would like to see all those people extradited. People have also discussed Turkey's bid to join the EU. Certainly possible that they would be looking at that as well. But, you know, it could not be that Turkey's actually taking a principled stand here, saying we don't want NATO expansion. It's not going to increase Turkish security to add these two states to NATO. Plus, the way it will provoke Russia is really important. And if you look, you know, Turkey has been the country that's had the most success engaging both Ukraine and Russia in talks. Now that has faded recently, no doubt. However, if a deal is going to be done, it seems somewhat likely at this point that Turkey would play a pretty significant role in helping to facilitate that, and the United States and NATO forcing Turkey to approve membership for two new additional states, one sharing an 800-mile-long border with Russia, could really harm the Ankara-Moscow relationship and cause some real problems. So then on Sunday, I guess, this was by Dave DeCamp on May 15th at antiwar.com. Blinken confident NATO will admit Finland and Sweden after speaking with the Turkish foreign minister. On Sunday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he is confident that NATO will reach a consensus on accepting Finland and Sweden after speaking with his Turkish counterpart. Blinken attended a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Berlin on Sunday. I don't want to characterize the specific conversations that we had in either with the foreign minister or within the NATO sessions themselves, but I could say this much. I heard almost across the board very strong support for Finland and Sweden joining the alliance if that's what they choose to do. I am very confident that we will reach a consensus. And so this is interesting because he does say almost across the board, where the way NATO works, it's supposed to be across the board. Now, some people have speculated that, now that NATO has 30 members, that maybe they could start to change some of the rules to allow people into the alliance without the consensus of all 30 other members, although this, I think, could get pretty complicated. There's, also been talk for years about expelling Turkey from NATO, so maybe that could pick back up. But anyways, this is the current position of the West is, we're going to allow these two states in. Now, even after this, Turkey maintained, Erdogan reaffirmed that, we are not planning to allow these two states to enter NATO. So there's something yet to be worked out here. And again, my sense is that Erdogan is looking to get concessions from the West, or maybe even it's just a low-level shakedown. Maybe they'll pledge billions of dollars to Turkey in humanitarian aid for the Syrian refugees, which, in fairness to Turkey, in some not too, but there is a real issue here where the Western countries facilitated a regime change in Syria, backed ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, Turkey facilitated and supported this, but that is the cause of a lot of the refugees who now live in Turkey, and it's the ongoing Western sanctions on Assad and Syria that are preventing rebuilding and people from being able to turn back home. Again, people have been in Turkey as refugees from the Syrian war for over a decade now, so this is a real issue that actually does have to be resolved, and Erdogan putting pressure on the West to resolve that isn't necessarily the worst thing. However, I think when you actually look at Turkey's role in all this and their ongoing war in the Syrian civil war, you find their case to be a whole lot less sympathetic. And my guess is that if the West did donate some money to Turkey to deal with the refugees, they would be a whole lot less sympathetic, or there would be a whole lot of skimming going on by Turkey of that money. It wouldn't certainly all go to the Syrians. So another thing going on here with the NATO membership for Finland and Sweden is that different NATO members are pledging to defend these two countries despite the fact that they're not formal alliance members. And so we've had this from the UK, US, and France so far, but myself and Will Porter outlined that Iceland, Denmark, and Finland are also getting in on this as well. We write on May 16th at the Libertarian Institute, NATO members pledge to defend Sweden, Finland if Russia attacks. Iceland, Denmark, and Norway have offered security guarantees to Finland and Sweden if either come under attack, after Stockholm said it would follow Helsinki in requesting membership into the NATO bloc. On Monday, 3 European states said they would do everything possible to ensure swift ascension process for new applicants while vowing to take action on their behalf in the event of an attack. Now, we don't tie this to the Turkey story in our article, but I just want to take a second to mention, because I think this is important. All these states are are pledging to defend them, and they're saying, oh, well, this is going to be an accelerated process, but it may not be if Turkey really draws a red line and says, no, the way NATO is supposed to work, that actually means no, that these states are not NATO members. And so how long does this pledge actually last for? So a joint statement by the 3 states said, Finland and Sweden's security is a matter of common concern to all of us. Should Finland or Sweden be victims of aggression on their own territory before obtaining NATO membership, we will assist Sweden and Finland by all means necessary. Helsinki declared on Sunday that it had submitted official membership application after hinting it would do so for weeks, citing Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Stockholm followed suit just 1 day later, agreeing to end the policy of neutrality that endured for 2 centuries. The 3-way pledge from Copenhagen, Oslo, and Reykjavik goes beyond previous assurances given by NATO members. The UK has promised to assist Finland and Sweden's defense, while Stockholm said it received similar security assurances from Washington earlier this month. NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, meanwhile, said the alliance would deploy assets to the Baltics to deter a Moscow attack. In April, the Kremlin warned the Nordic states' membership in the Western military bloc would lead to nuclear proliferation in the region, suggesting it could respond with a new missile deployment in the Baltics. And there was a statement by Dmitry Medvedev on this. On Monday, however, President Vladimir Putin appeared to scale back those comments, saying Moscow had no problem with Stockholm and Helsinki, and their membership itself does not present a direct threat to Russia. The Kremlin will only respond to the expansion of military infrastructure into either country, the Russian leader said, adding, "We will see what will be based in the threats that it created for us." And, you know, the way that this is laid out is kind of important if we're looking at Ukraine too, to understand potentially why Russia ended up attacking Ukraine. It wasn't necessarily that Ukraine was a NATO member yet, and the US had even signaled that would be a long time before Ukraine became a NATO member, but the fact that Ukraine was de facto treated like a NATO member, war games, military installation, weapons shipments, training, all of this is, you know, likely going to be the Russian concern. The aspiring NATO states have voiced concern about Russia's attack before they are brought into the alliance's collective security pact. NATO has promised to expedite the NATO membership process, and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he is confident the two Nordic states will get approval from all 30 members. However, you know, Turkey says that this may not be the case. And let's see, I now want to move on to start talking about some war games because the latest round of war games are led by the UK, actually involve Finland and Sweden. And this is from myself and Will Porter on May 17th at the Libertarian Institute. Major NATO war games set to begin miles from Russian base. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization will soon conduct large-scale exercises in the Baltics, with thousands of troops from more than a dozen nations set to take part in war games just 40 miles from the nearest Russian military base. Dubbed Hedgehog, the drills will kick off later this week in Estonia and run until June 3rd, meant to simulate a Russian invasion. They will involve 15,000 troops from 14 countries, including the United States, Britain, Denmark, Estonia, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, and Norway, as well as non-NATO members Ukraine, Georgia, Sweden, and Finland. According to Major General Palm, a deputy commander of the Estonian Defense Forces, the exercises will take place just 40 miles from a Russian military base, a facility hosting Moscow's 76th Guard Air Assault Division in a border city. The size of the war games, among the largest in the Baltics has seen since the fall of the USSR, their proximity to the Russian border, and the inclusion of non-NATO member states are likely to escalate tensions with Moscow. Though the exercises were planned before Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February, they will no doubt serve as an additional show of force as NATO's members flood the Ukrainian battlefield with billions in weapons and gear. The drills come as U.S. lawmakers move ahead on a massive $40 billion aid package for Kiev, around half of which will be devoted to arms shipments. That bill follows more than $14 billion in aid already delivered and authorized by the U.S. government. The Hedgehog military exercises will also overlap with two major NATO and allied military drills concurrently being held in the region, Defender Europe and Swift Response, which together involve 18,000 soldiers from 20 countries, and a flurry of additional war games are planned for Germany, Finland, Poland, and elsewhere in the coming months. Major General Palm noted that Hedgehog will include more participants than originally planned due to the war in Ukraine, though declined to go into specifics about how many Ukrainian or Georgian troops would take part. I would not like to get into the details, but we are talking about a few people, not tens or hundreds of people. It is unclear if Finland or Sweden were initially meant to participate in the latest drills, but both countries recently applied for membership in the NATO bloc, citing security concerns stemming from Moscow's attack on its neighbor. Now, one of the war games that we didn't mention there, so think about that. There's 15,000 in Hedgehog, 18,000 in Swift Response and European Defender, and so that's 33,000. And now we're getting into the Neptune shield drills, and me and Will cover this on May 17th at the Libertarian Institute. NATO takes command of carrier strike group for massive drill. The USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier strike group and other American warships have come under command of the NATO military alliance for major drills in the Baltic, Adriatic, and Mediterranean seas. Dubbed Neptune Shield 22, the war games will be run from May 17th to the 31st and involve 19 NATO members, among them Albania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia, Spain, Turkey, the UK, and the US. A NATO press release said several US ships will come under control of the alliance's Naval Striking and Support Forces Command, also known as Strike for NATO, all caps there, for the duration of the military exercises. During NESH 22, that's the Neptune Shield 22, we will conduct the handover of command and control of the USS Harry S. Truman Command Strike Group and the Combined Task Force 61-2, which includes the USS Courage Amphibious Ready Group and the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Group from the 6th Fleet to Strike Force NATO and the wider alliance. Again, this is a statement from the U.S. military. The Neptune Shield drills are a part of a larger series of military operations launched by NATO in 2020 called Project Neptune, an initiative meant to improve integration between Strike for NATO and the U.S. 6th Fleet. Earlier this year, 15 ships from some 90 aircraft took part in another round of drills known as Neptune Strike, also conducted under the same project. The UK is currently engaging in Project Hedgehog, we mentioned at the end of this article. And so you could see major military buildup by the US in Europe. Now, we also have this article from Dave DeCamp, May 12th at antiwar.com. US Army to revamp Alaskan forces to prepare for Arctic conflict. Dave writes, the US Army is planning to revamp its forces in Alaska to prepare for potential future cold weather conflicts in the Arctic, an area where Washington and NATO allies are looking to expand their military footprint. And this is from the Army Secretary. I think right now the purpose of Army forces in Alaska is much more about creating an extreme cold weather capable formation. The Army currently has Stryker Brigade in Alaska that uses 8 heavy vehicles. The Army Secretary is considering replacing it with a more mobile infantry unit, and the Stryker vehicles would be substituted with vehicles more suited for cold weather. So, as you see, we're also building up in Alaska as well. Now, I want to get into a couple articles here about how different European states are reacting to and wanting to engage with Russia. And this from Dave DeCamp on May 16th. The leaders of France, Germany, and Italy favor negotiations to end Ukraine war. In recent weeks, the leaders of the 3 largest EU countries by population, France, Germany, and Italy, have all come out in favor of negotiations between Kiev and Moscow as a way to end the fighting in Ukraine. Unlike President Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi have all spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th. The 3 European leaders have all signed off on sending weapons to Ukrainians, but have also been calling for a ceasefire. After speaking with Putin by phone on Friday, Scholz wrote on Twitter, "There must be a ceasefire in Ukraine as quickly as possible." In an address to European Parliament last week, Macron said, "We are not at war with Russia." He said it's Europe's duty to stand with Ukraine to achieve a ceasefire, then build peace. Draghi met with Biden last week. After the meeting, the Italian leader who previously discouraged talks with Russia said it was time to start thinking about a peace deal. After the Biden-Draghi meeting, the White House still appeared to be uninterested in negotiations. This is from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. We feel the most constructive role is to continue support for Ukrainians, hands at the negotiating table, and support them militarily. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin recently spoke with his Russian counterpart for the first time since Russia invaded, but Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the U.S. top diplomat, has yet to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The two diplomats last spoke on February 15th. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson shares Washington's view on negotiations. Johnson recently told Macron in a call that he urged Ukraine not to hold talks with Russia, and reportedly told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on April 9th that even if Kiev was ready to sign a deal with Moscow, the West was not. And that is another article by Dave DeCamp I want to cover. UK Boris Johnson urges Ukraine not to negotiate with Russia. This from Dave DeCamp on May 9th. On Friday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron and said that he urged Ukraine against negotiating with Russia. According to a readout from the call from Johnson's office, the British leader updated Macron on his April 9th visit to Kiev. And this, according to the readout, the Prime Minister updated his visit to Kiev last month and shared his convictions that Ukraine would win, supported with the right level of defense and military assistance. The readout said Johnson urged any negotiations with Russia on terms that gave credence to the Kremlin's false narrative for the invasion and stressed that it was a decision for the Ukrainian government. And so he is, that is Prime Minister Boris Johnson, is opposed to that. And then there was also a story report in Ukrainian Pravda that Johnson had said this to Zelensky. Now, we have another article from Dave DeCamp here. Zelensky says Macron urged him to cede territory to achieve ceasefire with Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that French President Macron asked him to make territorial concessions to Russia to achieve a ceasefire. And so, you know, we can kind of see here how Europe really isn't united on this, despite what the U.S. is presenting. They have very different ideas on how to approach this. And we see countries like Poland, the Baltic states, the UK, and the U.S. being the most hawkish, where some other countries are far more reserved on these issues. This article from Will Porter at the Libertarian Institute on May 17th. Austria to remain neutral, foreign minister says. Austria's top diplomat says country would remain outside the NATO military bloc and keep its long-standing policy of neutrality after both Sweden and Finland applied to join the alliance. Asked about the two Nordic states' intention to join NATO ahead of a European Union meeting in Brussels on Monday, the foreign minister said that while he understands the reasons for applying, Austria would not follow suit. We Austrians are not a member of NATO. I fully respect Finland and Sweden are thinking about joining NATO, and this will probably take a path very quickly, but that's their decision, not ours. Austria will continue to be a neutral country. Austria is legally bound to neutrality under its constitution, which bars it from entering into military alliances or hosting foreign bases on its soil. Though Finland and Sweden lack similar legal provisions, both countries have traditionally kept policies of non-alliance, only rethinking this stance in wake of Russia's attack on Ukraine in late February. The foreign minister went on to argue that Moscow had only made NATO more relevant with this invasion, citing Helsinki and Stockholm's newfound desire to join the alliance, and that President Putin's strategy has blown back in his face. What a surprise that offensive war would do that. On the sidelines of the EU meeting, the foreign minister later said that Vienna is not only politically neutral towards Ukraine and supports sanctions on Moscow, as there is no such thing in neutrality in a war of aggression. His own country would remain non-aligned militarily, as is completely different geographical situation, has completely different history. So that is that. Now, Russia says there are no ongoing talks. Dave DeCamp, May 17th at antiwar.com. Russia-Ukraine peace talks not happening in any form as Ukraine toughens stance. Almost 3 months into Russia's war in Ukraine, there appears to be no hope that a negotiated solution will be reached anytime soon. On Tuesday, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Runusko said that warring sides are not currently holding peace talks in any form. No negotiations are not going on. Ukraine has practically withdrawn from negotiations process, he told Interfax. The New York Times reported on Tuesday that Vladimir Medlinsky, who heads the Russian delegation in early negotiations with Ukraine, said Kiev hasn't responded to a draft peace deal Russia put forward on April 15th. A Ukrainian negotiator responded to the Russian negotiator statement's comments by saying Russia is operating with fates and lies. So it doesn't seem like talks are going anywhere at this point. We have of course, the House. Nancy Pelosi brought delegation to Kiev, so the Senate couldn't be outdone. And we have Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell leading a delegation of senators on a trip to Kiev this past week. McConnell went with Susan Collins, John Barrasso, who's from Wyoming, and John Cornyn from Texas. Now, after this, the Senate passed a $40 billion Ukraine aid package. This was initially proposed by the White House at $33 billion. The House kicked it up to $40, and the Senate agreed with that. The vote was 81-11. The move came after Rand Paul blocked the massive vote the vote on the massive aid package last Thursday. It, I think, gets passed on Monday. And Rand Paul was just trying to have the Congress or the Senate add a amendment to the bill that would include an inspector general for the funds. If you're going to approve a $40 billion to go to a foreign country, it would make sense to have somebody in charge of oversight, but of course it ends up getting passed anyways. So yeah, that was it. It just goes to show that this is likely going to be a very corrupt package of money that they don't want any oversight for. Now, we saw 11 no votes in the Senate. I think 57 no votes in the House, all Republicans. And we also have Senator Tommy Tuberville, who's a former football coach and now a senator from Alabama, warning Tuesday that the U.S. is risking war with Russia by poking the bear in Ukraine. And it does go to show that there are a few people in the Senate and the House who do oppose this path to war that the White House and so many in Congress like Lindsey Graham, Adam Kinzinger are putting America on. But there is some resistance to that still at this point. Now, maybe one of the most disturbing stories from the past week from Dave DeCamp, NATO pledges open-ended military support for Ukraine. On Sunday, NATO pledged open-ended military support for Ukraine as member states continue to say they are prepared to back Kiev in its war against Russia for the long term. At a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Berlin, German foreign minister said that the alliance would give Ukraine military assistance for as long as Ukraine needs this support for the self-defense of its country. While there have been reports of Ukrainian counterattacks, Russia has been making significant territorial gains in the east, but NATO leaders still insist Ukraine can win. And so how long they could keep up this pace of funding is somewhat questionable, because it's a lot of money. I know they could print a lot of money, but this is an obscene amount of money that they're sending to Ukraine. Over time, I would suspect that it gets harder to get the weapons to the Ukrainian battlefield as more Ukrainian infrastructure is destroyed. And so this is only going to get more expensive and more logistically complicated. And so I do wonder if they're able to actually maintain what they are saying. But nonetheless, this policy is going to get Ukrainians killed for a long time, especially because all these countries are also opposing talks between Russia and Ukraine. There's continues to be some cross-border attacks into Ukraine. These are happening I would say maybe weekly or maybe 2 or 3 times a week at this point. In the latest one person was killed, according to Russia. Ukraine has been very coy if they're carrying out these attacks or not, but we have seen Western countries like the UK saying that they're fine with with Ukraine using these weapons offensively. Russia says that the NATO is risking direct conflict and a full-fledged nuclear war. This is something that we've been talking about on the show for a long time, and I do think it's a real possibility. And the last story I have here on the Ukraine situation is the U.S. wants to combine tariffs with phased Russian oil bans, and this was proposed by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, where first they're going to step up tariffs on Russian oil to increase the price of it and drive down the demand for it, and then they would actually have an oil ban. I'm not sure if the EU is going to go for this. It seems somewhat unlikely, especially since there's a lot of countries in the EU that are very dependent on the Russian fuel and understand a little bit more the context of what has happened in Ukraine with NATO expansion, and are at least not as pro-West and as pro-isolating Russia as the U.S. is, and they're not willing to destroy their economies to increase isolation on Russia a little bit. So even this, I don't know if this proposal is going to have any legs. All right, 2 other stories that I want to touch on before I wrap up today that I have written at the Libertarian Institute. This on May 13th, Israel police attacked mourners carrying casket of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. 2 days after Israeli forces shot and killed Al Jazeera reporter Shireen Abu Akleh, they beat mourners carrying the slain journalist's coffin. The Israeli police in full riot gear confronted the funeral procession carrying Shireen's body outside the St. Louis French hospital in occupied East Jerusalem. Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Several videos showed the Israeli police hitting people carrying the casket with clubs, nearly causing the body to be dropped. And for people who haven't seen this video footage, I really recommend checking out my article and at least clicking on the 2 or 3 videos that I have linked there from Twitter. But you could actually see the Israeli police in full riot gear are hitting people who have their hands on a casket. I mean, this is appalling and disturbing. Now, the Israeli police claim that the Palestinians began rioting before the funeral, and the officers were attempting to disperse the violent people to allow the funeral to move forward. Now, there's, I guess, there is video. You can see Palestinians throwing what looks like 2 water bottles at the Israeli police. However, they were not the people carrying the casket. And also, if you're a police officer who shows up at a funeral in full riot gear when you're a part of the police force that killed the person the funeral is for, having a couple water bottles thrown at you really isn't a part of a violent protest. It's about what you're doing being just so outrageous. So that's part of the point there. And obviously they weren't just arresting the dangerous people. Now, I have since writing this article, I figured out before this that it actually wasn't the first confrontation between her funeral and the Israeli police. They actually entered the hospital before, hit a man who was on crutches, and were attempting to interfere with the procession of her casket even before that. Now, back to my article here. Al Jazeera journalist Imran Khan, who witnessed the attack, said the Israeli forces targeted mourners because they did not want them to walk with Abu Akleh's coffin. He had the Israeli police discriminate against Muslims seeking to attend her funeral. The Israeli army is asking people if they are Christian or Muslim. If you're a Muslim, you're not allowed in. Shireen was a Palestinian American, but was also not a Muslim Palestinian. She was a Christian Palestinian. Senator Bernie Sanders condemned the Israeli attack in a tweet. And while Bernie's opposition on Israel is always meaningless and often what I like to call sheep herding. Basically, there's a few people who are going to see this terrible thing happen, and they need an American political figure to condemn it, because if nobody condemns it, then it's kind of an indictment of the whole system. And so Bernie Sanders is going to condemn this, but eventually he's going to tell his people not to prioritize the Palestinian issue. He's done in the past. He'll do it again. At the same time, he did, tweet this out while it was a major story, and, over 100,000 likes, lots of retweets, lots of an engagement on this. So it's not unimportant that he said this. Also, the U.S. Apparently got insurances from Israel that they wouldn't harass the funeral. And so apparently the U.S. is a little bit upset by this. Now, after the assault outside the hospital, Israeli police continue to attack, harass Palestinians grieving Abu Akleh. At the church where the journalist's parents were receiving condolences, police removed Palestinian flags, and you could see another video of police ripping flags out of a car that was a part of the funeral procession. It's exactly unclear to me if it was the hearse or if it was just, maybe a car with their family in it or something, but nonetheless, absolutely disgusting to rip down flags at a funeral procession. So yeah, and there's another show that I did last week with Connor Freeman where I go more in detail about Shireen's life and also how she was killed. Last article I have here is about Venezuela. White House considering sanctions relief for Venezuela, but won't end Trump's maximum pressure policy. The Joe Biden administration has agreed to ease sanctions on Venezuela, offering to scale back penalties if the government commits to a meeting with opposition leaders. Despite the rare diplomatic outreach, one U.S. official said the economic war launched by President Donald Trump would continue regardless. Under the proposed deal, Washington will allow U.S. oil giant Chevron to begin talks for future business in Venezuela and remove former senior energy official from its sanctions blacklist, the Miami Herald and Reuters reported on Tuesday, citing several unnamed officials. In exchange, President Nicolas Maduro would engage the Venezuelan opposition in talks hosted by Mexico. However, one official made clear that any such agreement would not mean an end to the U.S. efforts to strangle Venezuela's economy, saying that penalties on the Maduro regime will remain in place. We are not doing this to reverse Trump's maximum pressure campaign. Our policy has not overall changed, they said. The offer to Caracas was reportedly decided in consultation with the opposition leader Juan Guaido, who's been recognized as Venezuela's legitimate interim president by the U.S. and dozens of other states since 2019. Guaido has attempted to launch an armed uprising in the same year, but failed to inspire any mass defections from security forces, and the insurrection quickly fizzled. According to the Washington Post and other news outlets, he was involved in another coup attempt in 2020, which was led by an obscure U.S. mercenary firm and landed in spectacular failure. Earlier this month, the Biden administration reaffirmed U.S. support for Guaido, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken declaring him the rightful leader of Venezuela and vowing to broker talks with Maduro. A White House official cited by the Herald stressed that any sanctions relief would be limited and said Chevron would need to seek further approval before beginning any projects in Venezuela. Additional sanctions relief will depend on any progress with opposition figures in Mexico City. On Tuesday, Venezuelan Vice President Delike Rodriguez said she hoped the dialogue would eventually lead to an end to all sanctions, and confirmed that discussions were underway to allow Western oil firms to continue operations in the country. Though Washington is growing desperate to boost the global supply of fossil fuels as it attempts to isolate and cripple the Russian economy, the Biden administration previously denied reports that it discussed additional oil imports with Venezuelan officials during talks in March. The relatively minor diplomacy with Caracas has drawn fire from both parties in Congress, with Democrat Senator Bob Menendez insisting Biden must refrain from lifting any additional sanctions until Maduro's made concrete concessions at the negotiating table. House Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said the president was doubling down on American last energy policies, and that socialist Democrats would rather do business with socialist regimes instead of giving good jobs to American workers, while Americans pay the highest gas prices in history. In a statement on the proposed sanctions relief, GOP Senator Marco Rubio blasted Biden, saying he continues to appease dictators, while Senator Ted Cruz similarly said that the administration continues to appease and show weakness to practically every enemy of America, including the Taliban, Cuba, China, Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. So as you can see, the rhetoric is absolutely absurd. Biden met similar resistance when he announced that the U.S. was opening up some flights to Cuba and resuming some family reunification policies that had been ended under the Trump administration. In both cases, he's not readopting even the Barack Obama policy, which was pretty aggressive against both Venezuela and Cuba, but nonetheless, they were policies where engagement, diplomacy were able to happen, unlike, Donald Trump stepping up, returning to the Cuban embargo and waging a maximum pressure campaign of his own against Maduro in Venezuela. And the Republicans and Democrats in Congress absolutely go ballistic. It's just crazy how much everybody in America at this point hates diplomacy. And, we've seen this rhetoric building for years where you can't engage with Iran, you can't engage with Assad, you can't engage with Gaddafi, you can't engage with Saddam, you can't engage with the Houthis, you can't engage with Hezbollah, you can't engage with Putin, with Xi, with Castro, or Diaz in Cuba, with Nicaragua and Bolivia and Venezuela. And we've built that you can't engage now with any of these countries, and it's such a massive block of the world that it creates perpetual conflicts, and it ensures that the U.S. is going to waste a ton of money and be less prosperous perpetually into the future because of these policies that ensure future wars and aggression. And it's not even like the Biden administration is soft on foreign policy anywhere. Very aggressive. The fact that they're looking for some minor reduction in hostilities against a couple countries in our own hemisphere is the most minor of diplomatic routes that he could possibly take. And it's as if, not 1939 or something like that, but in 1942 he's appeasing Hitler or something, the way that they portray even the most minor of concessions made to attempt to move forward with countries are important issues. Now remember, they always claim that this is about the people of those countries or that country or whatever, but the Venezuelans and the Cubans are suffering because of the American sanctions. I mean, their government's own totalitarian and socialist policies don't help, but certainly the U.S. economic warfare, the largest power in the world, could definitely drive a major blow to these economies. All right, guys, that's where I'm wrapping up for today. More shows later this week. Patrick McFarland returns. Connor Freeman's coming back. So be sure that you're subscribed somewhere. And I hope everybody has really enjoyed the show lately. I've had a couple new guests, Brandon P. Buck and Misty Winston. So if you haven't heard either of those shows, I've gotten great feedback on them, and plan to have both of those people back on in the future. So subscribe if you liked them. Thanks, everyone.